This is episode 4 in Conversations with Cynthia. I just want to start off by reiterating the purpose of this series of videos is to use past Forrest quotes, the information that Jack has provided, a little bit of searcher information to try to figure out where Jack found Forrest's chest and thus identifying Forrest's special place. I would like to thank all of you who have sent me emails with your Q&A with Jack, and thank you for agreeing that I am allowed to share that in these videos. I hope you enjoy this one.
Or are they just like clear? Can you explain that?
There's no subterfuge in that point. Everything is straightforward, and the tendency with thousands of people that are searching, they tend to overcook the poem. I tell people to read the book and then study the poem 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 times. And then go back and read the book again slowly, looking for hints in the text that will help you solve the clues in the poem. That's the way to do that. Yeah. But you have to know where to start. If you don't have the starting point, you don't have anything. And I've said that the treasure is hidden in the Rocky Mountains somewhere north of Santa Fe.
By the starting point, you mean the starting point in the book, or the starting point in the
in the poem? And you need to know where the first clue is in the poem. You have to find that spot. From then on, it's academic.
Gotcha.
This was posted by Dale on his blog in 2018. But the conversation he is talking about took place back in the early years of the chase. It was Dale, this journalist, and Forrest having breakfast at the Loretta Inn. Forrest looked at the journalist and asked him where he would begin. Where was his WWH? The journalist mentioned his theory about Yellowstone National Park being WWH. The gist of what occurred next was that Forrest asked how that would help and mentioned that Yellowstone National Park was a big place. So where would he begin his search? After an additional short discussion, Forrest told him that his idea did not give him a place to begin and that WWH was a specific place, not a region. That was one of the first times Dale heard Forrest say that any clue referred to a specific place.
Around gawking at me with tubes of hole down my throat. I said, I want to die in the mountains or along the stream or something. I said, dying is very personal. It's something you have to do all by yourself. And to be frank about it, I don't want anybody watching. So I told myself, I'm going to write this poem, I'm going to hide this treasure, and with my last, if I have another terminal illness, my last dying gasp will be to go out there and where that treasure chest is and take my own life on my own terms. That's important.
In this Q&A, Jack answered, the poem is written from his perspective. It's befitting the man, and you do have to study him, I think, to definitively figure it out. Okay, one more statement from Jack before I move on. Jack said, I don't think I could have figured it out without coming to understand at least part of what made the place special to him, but he did provide a little additional color to that for me. Jack went on to say, he could have complicated emotional connections to places, as we saw in My War for Me, with his association between the Vietnam waterfall and Philadelphia from his cockpit. We know the first clue is begin at where warm waters halt. Early in the chase, Forrest said to a journalist, why do people look in Glacier? There's no warm water there, I don't think. Is this what Forrest meant when he said, a comprehensive knowledge of geography might help? After my 2016 New York Times interview where Forrest said, did she show you the water? And the journalist said, no, we did not touch the water. And Forrest replied succinctly, there's no warm water under that bridge, I promise you. I understood he meant actual water that was warm, thermal water. From then on, I always touched the water when I went boots on the ground. I found these statements from Jack regarding WWH. Was there physical warm water at the warm water halt location? He said yes. Was warm water really warm? He answered, in the sense that the poem means yes. WWWH have to do with physical water? If so, was the water actually hot or warm? Jack answered, warmth is relative, but to Forrest, yes. This question asked Jack if you mixed the hidden clues in the book into a catalyst, would they give you a map to the treasure? His reply was, I think appreciating all the context and looking at the big picture opened things up for me, and I'm sure in general at least that's what he meant. And one last question regarding the special place. Jack was asked, do you know why the spot was special to Forrest? His reply was, my perspective is I think it's difficult to imagine how someone could figure it out without at least surmising part of why it might be important to him. But Forrest had some very deep and complicated emotions about things, such as the waterfall-Philadelphia connection that I don't fully understand. And I think the spot was in that category for him.
Target, and I got shot down twice. I took battle damage other times, but I kept coming back, and that's why the grave marker in my book became so important to me. You know, there was something a lot larger than me going on in this story. I mean, I'm a kind of a romantic. At night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm writing things. And I get up the next morning at 9 o'clock and come in here and look, and I said, my God, who wrote that? I mean, that's, but you know, I said, yeah, I mean, and that's where the treasure chest became an important thing to me. I'm going to do this. And
why did Jack say regarding the location of the treasure, as much as I didn't want the treasure to be there? Was Jack afraid of bears? We know he carried bear spray. Was Jack afraid of crossing a thermal area to get to the forest in an area that was posted to keep out due to danger? This makes no sense since Forrest stated many times the treasure was not in a dangerous place. You can take your kids. Was Jack afraid of getting a little wet? He pretty much confirmed the need to wade across a stream or marsh when he answered Forrest's quote about prevaricating. I always thought that Forrest's answer to that question meant that you needed to do something that was like walking or a form of walking that some would not categorize as walking, and that is accurate. Remember, Jack found and retrieved the chest June 5th and 6th when the rivers and streams were ice cold and flowing high. And take it in the canyon down. Jack said it was a physical canyon. You have to go down it to travel the path of the poem, and you have to travel from one clue to another through the directions in the poem. And finally, confirming, you don't walk through all the clues. You begin at where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down, and it's too far to walk to that point, meaning, I believe, put in below the home of Brown. Not far, but too far to walk, put in below the home of Brown. Jack wrote, it was clear there was something in the back half of the second stanza that was a huge difficulty for people to figure out, forming a bottleneck there. So when I was figuring out the clues, I was looking for something in that section that would not be an easy guess, but would require some real effort to see things from his perspective. Jack goes on to say, that was the part of the poem that felt most like solving a riddle to me. But Forrest did not purposefully design the clue there as a riddle. It was just how he saw things. When Jack was asked if he figured out Home of Brown before he ever went boots on the ground, he replied, yes.
From there is no place for the meek. The end is ever drawing nigh. There'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high.
I have very little information regarding these 4 lines. Regarding the semicolon, Jack answered, I would say he uses the semicolon correctly there as a connecting of ideas in the stanza. I asked Jack about Forrest's quote, what is wrong with me just riding my bike out there and throwing it in the water high when I am through with it? Was that feasible? Jack replied, I always thought that was likely but not certain. It's easy to write that off as him being playful, but that gets into the question of whether he would allow himself to be misleading, even in a joke. I always had a perception of him as operating with a basic sense of fairness in how he answered questions, but I thought being playful could be the possible exception. Huh? This is from a Lorraine Mills interview which is no longer available. Forrest said, "So what does water high mean? Is it deep water or water that's deeper than normal?"
If you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down your quest to cease.
So now we've reached the fun part of the poem where Jack has given us the most information ever regarding the blaze, as well as, if you are brave and in the wood, also past tense. Jack referred to this as a gap. Jack confirmed the poem directs you to a section of forest in which to search for the blaze. When Jack answered Donna's question about using the human trail, he said, "I can say the whole time I was searching for the blaze and treasure in the forest, I did not step foot on a human trail." This implies he was not in the forest prior to searching for the blaze, right? In this question, Jack was asked if the blaze is within 50 feet, give or take, of the creek referred to as your creek in the poem. Jack answered, "I don't want to give that much away, but there is a word that to me I could not objectively define for certain that meant I had to search a larger area of forest than I otherwise would have." Jack wrote, "One of the biggest challenges of the poem for me was that I could not say for certain how one particular word was defined for forest at the location. It ended up being the definition I thought was most likely to be correct, but that uncertainty meant I had to expand the bounds of the section of forest in which I knew the treasure to be located in order to be as objective and thorough as possible." I believe that word is wood, if you are brave and in the wood. Okay, this is where it gets down to semantics. Jack uses the word forest, but Forrest used the word wood. The dictionary describes a forest as a thick growth of trees and underbrush covering an extensive tract of land, whereas a wood is defined as a thick grove of trees. So basically it boils down to size. Jack's forest versus Forrest's wood. Jack says he didn't measure his. It may have been bigger than a football field. That was the total limits of what he thought was possible. But what he considered probable was smaller, and the treasure was found within those smaller bounds. This completes part 1. Tune in for part 2, where I will continue to use Jack's comments and Q&As to continue to discuss the blaze.